Hello and welcome to The Science Of. This is the series where we break down the science and math behind our favorite video games. This episode will be all about plate up. On the surface, there doesn't seem to be much there, but once you clear the plates, cook up some food, and realize the size and scale really do matter in this game. Let's turn up the heat, sit back, and wait for a table in The Science Of Plate Up. Let's begin by looking at the size and scale. In terms of size, there isn't anything too out of the ordinary for the player character or customers. Their scale seems fairly average. But how does that hold up for the restaurant itself or the tables? Well, given the size of the player and other items such as countertops, it's safe to say that a single square in plate up is about 25 inches by 25 inches. For the sake of clean math, let's round down to 24 inches by 24 inches. Using the numbers we just determined, we can extrapolate the size of a single dining table to be about 2 feet by 2 feet. This is a bit on the small size, especially when you consider there is a potential to serve up to 4 people in a single table. Thankfully, you can expand the tables if you have the funds. Using the same numbers, let's determine the size of the restaurant itself. On the small end, some places can be 6 squares by 9 squares. If each tile is 2 feet squared, this means the smaller restaurant is about 216 square feet. On the upper end, they could be roughly 432 square feet. For comparison, an average studio apartment or one-bedroom apartment is about 500 square feet. So to have a full-size restaurant in a space like that is pretty impressive. It's recommended that a restaurant should have about 12 square feet per customer. This would mean our large-end restaurant should in theory be good for about 36 customers. No wonder it's so easy to fail in the end days, since the total incoming customers can easily go beyond that. I kind of have a personal bone to pick with this one, but the size and the scale is extremely important part of plate up, especially when you consider the filing cabinet. This very feature is what made me think about making The Science Of. The filing cabinet is roughly on par with the player character in terms of size, which stands about 5 feet, 6 inches or so, maybe a little less, a little more. But the filing cabinet is only capable of holding the thickness of a single piece of paper. That's it, a single piece of paper. So technically 2 if we consider that you can copy the blueprint. Now I will grant you that, as we determined earlier, a square is 2 by 2 and a blueprint takes up that entire space, meaning the paper is a little bit larger than your average size piece of paper. But still, the filing cabinet is huge by comparison, and you should be able to hold a little more than a single piece of paper. I mean, the point of the filing cabinet is to file pieces of paper away. I'm just saying there are more efficient ways to manage blueprints. I also want to talk about the size of the trash bins or trash cans. Now, granted, in the game, they are on the smaller size. They don't take up a full tile. But even then, a basic trash bin can only hold 2 items. Compared to the real world, the trash bin should be able to hold 6 gallons. And that's a small trash can. But maybe, just maybe, we're working with a tiny little bathroom-sized trash can rather than something designed for a kitchen. They must have spent all the budget on the decorations. Speaking of size, I think it would be interesting to discuss the mess made by the customers. When customers make a mess, it tends to be in the surrounding squares of the table they are using. But given what we know, that means they are spilling food up to 2 feet away from where they are eating. I know things happen, but that's outrageous! Especially when you consider one of the bad cards that you can get ups that range even further. Along that line, I want to point out that coffee tends to be one of the messier foods. Consider that the average cup of coffee is between 6 to 8 ounces, and yet the customer's mess covers nearly 4 square feet on a single tile. I think the customers must just dump their coffee directly onto the floor. On top of that, a mess tends to significantly slow the player down, meaning not only is the mess wide, it must also be inches deep. What are these customers doing to create such a disgusting mess? Let's put the size and scale to rest for a bit, as there are other things to examine. There are many odd objects in PlateUp. Even though there isn't much science and math behind it, I think it's worth talking about the booking phone. This strange device is for the player to bring in more customers, but let's actually think about what's happening. The player, not the customer, is calling and earns money for doing so. My question is, who's the player calling, and how do the customers know to come in? Is the player just randomly soliciting people to bring them in? Is the booking phone just some sort of like side business that the player runs? Sadly, there are just some questions we can't answer with science or math. We can, however, discuss the science and math behind food prep. I've always found the method for chopping food to be very interesting. Before mixers are available, the player must chop their food manually. The general motion is similar to a karate chop. Hi-ya! This leads me to believe that the player character must secretly have a black belt. But let's pull on that thread just a little bit more. A properly performed karate chop can produce about 500 pounds of force per square inch. If we consider an apple is about 2 to 3 inches, karate chop might be just a little bit overkill. That being said, I would be careful what you put under the chopping hands of your next PlateUp chef. Now it's time to dig into the money of PlateUp. For this example, let's examine the burger. A plain burger will net you about 3 coins. Considering that the average cost of a burger is about $2.50, I would say PlateUp is overcharging. However, we can use this information to determine a single coin is nearly equal to $1 US. With this knowledge, let's examine some of the items in-game. Let's start with the ever-popular dishwasher. The initial cost of the dishwasher is 120 coins or $120. This is actually a great deal considering the new dishwasher could easily set you back $1,000. With all that being said, the teleporter is the most expensive thing you can buy. Coming in at a starting price of $3,000, that's really expensive. Although, considering we are talking about a teleporter, this might actually be really cheap. I don't know about you, but if I could find a teleporter for $3,000, I would buy it in a heartbeat. So the conclusion about money is that food is generally overpriced, while the items in the game are on the cheap side. Thankfully, with the magic of a few karate chops, the player can cut the price in half. Let's turn up the heat and talk about serving hot food. The player will often grab fully cooked food right off the burner. Let's assume the food in question is being held at a proper temperature of 135 degrees Fahrenheit. This is considered a safe food storing temperature, and I think it's a good starting place. Studies have suggested that physically holding something at 130 degrees will result in full skin burns in just 30 seconds. So let's hope that you have plates ready to go and serve. If we consider a well-done steak, which needs to be cooked to a temperature of 160 degrees, well, let's just say you need to be really fast or you'll get burned. Speaking of heat, let's talk about the microwave, which tends to burst into flames anytime you run it on empty. Do not attempt this, because in the real world, a microwave could indeed catch fire if you run it when empty. It's unlikely it's going to happen instantaneous like in PlateUp, but I'm not going to test it to find out. Let's move back to talking about the dishwasher, but for different reasons. For its size, the dishwasher is a huge waste of water. The PlateUp dishwasher can only hold up to 4 plates at a time before needing to be washed. For comparison, the average dishwasher can hold 10 to 12 plate settings, which includes plates, bowls, and cups. When you think about it, the PlateUp dishwasher must waste so much water. An average dishwasher uses about 6 gallons of water. If we had, say, 24 customers, which is a pretty busy day, that would be a total of 24 dishes or 6 cycles, meaning one day in PlateUp we would use 36 gallons of water just to wash the dishes. To put that into perspective, you could get a 36-gallon fish tank, which is about 30 by 15 by 21, which could comfortably hold 9 to 10 fish. So maybe save the water and get a fish tank instead. I would say you could save money by washing by hand, but the sinks in PlateUp are no better, possibly even worse. An average kitchen sink is about 22 by 33 by 9 and can hold about 28 gallons. When the player washes dishes in a standard sink, they can only wash one dish at a time. The sink empties and refills, meaning if we use our previous example of 24 dishes, one night would use 672 gallons of water. This means we could get a fish tank a little larger than 120 by 36 by 30. That's a lot of fish. It's also worth mentioning the disposal of some food containers. When a customer is finished, they leave their plate on the table. No concerns there, but what happens to the coffee cups? Most coffee cups are made of plastic or glazed ceramic. I would imagine neither of which would be good for eating. That being said, if they simply break their cups when finished, this might account for some of the mess we discussed earlier. There is, however, another option: styrofoam. It's possible but not recommended the customers just eat their cups when they finish. This isn't the best solution, but it does account for the disappearance of the cups. While most food in Plate Up tends to be of average size, I think it's worth biting into the math of Christmas crackers. These food items are a bit on the large size. Christmas crackers span the length of the table, meaning they are about 2 feet across. On the topic of size, the turkeys seem to be a little out of proportion. A single turkey in Plate Up can serve only 4 slices. Generally speaking, it's recommended you have a pound of turkey per person served. This seems a bit high, but it also means that turkeys being cooked are only about 4 to 5 pounds. Considering turkeys can range from 5 to 24 pounds, these guys are a little bit on the small side. Let's bring this restaurant to a close with timing. While the time to pass a day increases over time, a day in Plate Up is roughly 2 minutes long. Using this information, let's expand this to scale. Let's look at the microwave. Anything cooked in a microwave takes just 5 seconds. If we scale that up with real time, that would mean any food, no matter what it is, will be fully cooked in about 60 seconds. That's impressive. If we consider the hot dog, which takes just 3 seconds to cook, that would mean in the real world, you could have a fully cooked hot dog in about 36 seconds. Finally, despite being slightly larger, burgers in the real world would be fully cooked in just 24 seconds. Now that's fast food. Before we end, let me ask you a question. How long are you willing to wait at a restaurant? Let me know down below. I would say personally 10 to 15 minutes to get into a restaurant is acceptable. This is more subjective than other questions, but I think it's good to point out that customers in Plate Up have very little patience, or at least it appears that way at first. Customers in Plate Up will only wait 90 seconds during the day and 45 seconds at night. Once inside, customers are willing to wait 150 seconds while at a coffee table. That's better, but it's still pretty crazy considering sometimes you're serving full meals with dessert. If we use the same logic for food times, we can determine how long the customers are really willing to wait. If we go by our previous numbers and a customer is waiting 90 seconds, by that same math, this means the customer waiting during the day is willing to stand around outside for 18 hours. That had better be really good food. Now I kind of feel bad for burning all their stuff. With that, I believe we will need to end this episode of The Science of here. I really enjoyed breaking down games and comparing them to the real world. I absolutely intend to make more of these videos in the future. If you have any suggestions of games you want me to break down in the future, please let me know. But for now, we are going to have to leave this one here. So thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed everything. And I will see you guys in the next one. See ya!